Hi, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn. I'm delighted to be hosting today. Very excited for the content that we have today. If you are watching in chat or it's your first time here, we'd love to hear from you. We're live and monitoring the chat on YouTube and also Behance. You can come and just say hello if you like, or you can just watch along. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them in chat as we're going along. Very excited to be joined once again. It's been a little while between drinks, actually, between Jeremy and I. So here is Jeremy Lord, illustrator from Sydney, Australia. How you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you guys going? It has been a while, hasn't it?
Too long. We usually go live like once a month or something like that.
Yeah.
What's this from chat? What's for dinner and breakfast? And lunch, breakfast, and breakfast sandwich. Lunch is sandwich, dinner, KFC. Okay. That's a weird question, but I like it, Aiden. Thanks for jumping in. Khalid's in chat. Delicia. What did you have for breakfast? I'll take the question and switch it up. What'd you do?
What did I have for breakfast?
Yeah, Jeremy Lord.
Oh man, I'm an old man now. I had a boring porridge for breakfast. Yeah.
I make the kids porridge for breakfast as well, but I had cereal. So yeah, cereal in the house. What's up, everyone? Ethan in chat says hi, Jeremy. Yeah, so great to see everybody in chat jumping in. It's lovely to see some new faces and some old faces. Speaking of old faces, let's transition from my camera to Jeremy's, and maybe we'll just kind of get jumped into it. Let's jump into it.
Let's get jumped into it.
Do you want to kind of quickly, because there's a couple of new folks in chat, maybe just explain who you are and what you do before we jump in today, and then we'll get started.
So my name is Jeremy Lord. I am a freelance illustrator. So I do a lot of kind of work for packaging, product brands, just promo stuff, marketing. My kind of jam is very like cyberpunk, neon. It's kind of basically like Blade Runner is where I live in my brain. But today actually we'll be kind of leaning into that, but not doing much illustration, if that makes sense. Kind of leaning into the cyberpunk stuff a little bit more.
Cool.
And coming up with some new tips and tricks that I've learned in the time that you have banned me from coming back on this live show for a little while. I got a little bit of a sin bin, yellow card.
You got put on hold. Makes you sound like you did something wrong. You certainly did not. But we're back to regular scheduled programming, I think, for a little while before we start kind of in our road to Max, where we start doing kind of like Adobe Max kind of focus stuff. But yeah, I'm really excited for this because you've kind of had a lot of time to kind of think about what you would do next on Adobe Live. And there's been a lot of back and forth on like some cool techniques that Jeremy has in his wheelhouse that maybe he would share with us. So I'm excited because I don't know how to do any of this stuff. But let's, without further ado, let's jump over. We've got your screen up. We've got chat is live. Dark Hours Co. is looking after us in chat. We're here for 50 minutes. We've got another live stream a little bit after. But let's just get stuck into it. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. So we've got a bunch of new things that we can kind of cover today. Less, as I said, like less kind of illustrative stuff, more just kind of like cool stuff that you could do using mostly Photoshop, but we'll dive into Illustrator and Firefly as well for our final tip today. So these are all kind of like cyberpunk-y kind of things. They're just cool, fun things that I've kind of discovered or kind of learned about more or less recently. And I just wanted to share with everybody as well. So we'll get stuck in. So we got this one. This is your kind of quintessential, like very, like Blade Runner, Terminator kind of like cathode ray tube, old 90s and 80s TV kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And this is like, all of these are actually like relatively easy to do, and they cover some pretty kind of core concepts in Photoshop. And using a couple of techniques as well. That's not what this tool was made for, but it works for it. And I always love kind of those things as like little secret hacks. Like, hey, if you do this with that thing, which is for another thing, you get this result.
Right.
So let's get stuck into this. Our first one is this kind of CRT kind of type thing. So I'm going to start with just this kind of like black background. We've got nothing kind of going on there. And I'm going to go in and get some type going on this. So we've got that. I'm just kind of playing around with this idea of Blade Runner, but I don't want to do Blade Runner, so I'm going to go with this kind of like shade gunner because it sounds cool
Shade
and
gunner.
cyberpunky and kind of sounds like Blade Runner, but whatever.
Yep. I like it.
So we're going to line these up. I'm going to change the fonts on these as well to a kind of this kind of weird font that I've found called Transamerica Expanded. So it's double expanded.
Double expanded. Wow. Are you even allowed to do that?
I don't know, but that's what I'm doing. The H is weird, uppercase H. I think they've got a mix. It's one of those kind of like free fonts. So I'm going to go with lowercase h, and it's actually going to give me an uppercase H.
I've never come across that. That's so funny.
Neither have I. I was like, what's going on with this? Am I doing this wrong? But yeah, there we go. We got that. We can line that up nice and clean. Let's go and reduce the tracking on that back down to 0. That's a bit better.
So it's like extended, condensed now.
Yeah. Yep. So we got our type kind of lined up, but I wanted to bring in some extra elements into this as well. So we got this Japanese text, which is just kind of the same thing written in Japanese underneath.
Did you use some sort of translating thing to create that? Or?
No, I've got a bunch of keyboards installed up here in my keyboards. And I'm learning Japanese a little bit, but this literally says shaidogana, and it's just like it's that English word in Japanese, just with those that kind of type.
Nice.
Just again to kind of get that like cyberpunky kind of Blade Runner-y vibe.
Yeah.
Always a nice little kind of touch, I feel. And I'm also going to bring in just a few little graphics. So I've started making these little kind of asset sheets of graphics that I can kind of bring in at a moment's notice on stuff like this. So I'm going to bring these in to here.
And are they vectors? You have them.
They are vectors, yeah. So they're done in Illustrator.
Yeah, and that's just so you can scale them to any. You just bring them in, put them wherever you want.
Basically, yeah. So that we're just kind of using them in a way that will make a little bit more sense going forward.
It's like a sticker sheet or like a sprite sheet.
It's exactly that. Yeah. These are literally just built like a little kind of sprite sheet, sticker sheet. I pop these in my library as well in Photoshop. Yeah. So I can just kind of use them at the drop of a hat. And it just becomes this thing that's like, oh, I need something to go there. Let's just use this. And that'll work fine. So yeah, again, just taking the time to kind of design all of these things a little bit more clearly. There we go. I'm kind of happy with this composition as it is. So I've got all these guys in a group, just so I can kind of play with them a little bit more easily. But what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to select all of this stuff. I can delete my little kind of shape layer here. I'm going to select all of them, right click, and I'm going to convert to smart object. So it's kind of going to group all of my layers together. But then the kind of neat thing about this is that I can kind of double click on that again, and I can come back in and make some edits if I want to that particular thing. So it's just going to help me a little bit later, but it's also going to mean that the filters that I'm going to apply to this are going to be a little bit more adjustable, a little bit more kind of manipulatable, if that makes sense. So first things first is, and this is a little bit of a hack, instead of using the good old neon glow effect, which would be just kind of down here. So we want that kind of like cathode ray tube. It needs to look old. So normally what I would do is I would just go to this outer glow and apply something like this. But there's little kind of things that are going to happen later on. And I've actually started doing my neon glows in a couple of different ways. And one of those is to just go to my filter gallery and go to blur, Gaussian blur. And I'm going to bump this up to like 10-ish, right about there. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to duplicate that layer again. And because I'm working on these smart objects, you can see my Gaussian blur has gone into a smart filter, which I can come back and edit later on. And so now I can do the same thing with this. I can give it a bigger Gaussian blur. So basically what I'm doing is I'm applying the effect a bunch of different times, but they're individually controllable. And it kind of like, we've spoken about this a bunch of times before, it's kind of like a non-destructive thing where I can come back in. If I don't like this later on, I can double click back on this and it's still live, and I can reduce it or I can increase it. I can do whatever I want to this. And I can duplicate this effect again and again and again to get that kind of effect really kind of shining up. And that's a little bit too much. I'm going to drop the opacity on this one a little bit. So effectively, we're just kind of making this really glow, but we're controlling the amount every single time we're kind of doing that, if that makes sense.
That's really cool. Sorry, just before we move on, just a question of what the question Ethan asked. What kind of font are you using?
So this font is a font called, if I double click back on one of these, you will see this font is called, where is it? Trans-America Expanded. It's some font. I can't tell you where I got it from.
One of those fonts that just pops up from somewhere.
Yeah, probably like that font or something like that I was just like, it might even be an Adobe font. I'm not sure. But yeah, just looking up kind of cyberpunk fonts and kind of finding these to work on this sort of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I liked it because, like, you notice he didn't rasterize that text or that font or anything. So like you have the ability to go back into the smart object. You could change the letters, all that sort of stuff. Non-destructive.
I could do, yeah. But so the one downside to this technique that I'm doing here is because I've duplicated this smart object now 3 times, I would have to do the same thing to all 3 smart objects, right? So ideally, you're absolutely right. Ideally, I would just have one of these layers, right? And then if I come in here and I want to change one of these words to, like, I don't know, like Shedder Gunner or whatever, and then change that, that would just then update on its own over here and just kind of apply the blur. But I've gone and done that on 3 different, oh, look at that. Actually, I just discovered something.
It must reference that original one.
It's the same smart object, yeah. So you don't actually need to do it.
That's crazy.
All 3. That's really cool.
I didn't know that either. It's a good thing about learning live together.
Yeah.
Like, we're just like demonstrating something. It's like, oh, it must reference the original thing. I know
because it's taking the same root of the same smart object.
Wow, isn't that cool?
So yeah, so this is totally live type, and you can edit this later on as well, which is one of the nice things about converting this to a smart object. So thanks for that question.
Sweet, great question. Yeah, it's awesome.
Learned something. Cool. So we're pretty happy now with just kind of this level of blur. It's a little bit hard to read, but again, we can come back in and edit that a little bit kind of later on if we want to kind of clear it up a little bit more. All of this is kind of still editable, but I am also going to go in and kind of bring some color into this, because like black and white, it's fine, but we need something a little bit more kind of like screeny, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go in and put a gradient map on this bad boy, and I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to change I'm going to keep it kind of on the black side over there, but all my white, I want to, actually I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to add in a 3rd color into this. So we've got black and white on either side, and then we got let's go with a kind of like a bluish green maybe, or a yellowish green if we want that kind of like matrix look. Kind of depends on where you could go. You could go with blue as well and get like a, you know, James Cameron kind of Alien Terminator vibe, or you could go green and get something a little bit more matrix. Up to you kind of where you go with that. I'm going to click OK on that, and I'm going to drag this green over to the right. And what that's going to mean is it's going to give me a little bit more clarity. So it's only going to affect, that green shading is only going to affect a shorter range of the whites. If I drag it over to here, you can see the whole image gets really blown out. It's not great. So bringing that over to the right on my gradient just means I got a shorter window for the green to appear and nothing gets blown out anymore. So I'm going to hit OK on that. And I'm also going to change the setting on that, the blend mode setting, to an overlay. And again, that's going to give me a little bit more kind of the result that I'm looking for, of this kind of like screen burn effect, if you will. So already we're kind of getting that kind of vibe. you can see that shapes are blending into each other a little bit. Kind of down here, we're getting this kind of like burn and blend into the shapes. It's kind of a nice effect overall. But we still need that kind of like a screen effect to apply to this and work in that way. So let's go on, and I'm going to add a slight small, not too small, because again, we can come back and edit that later on, but I'm going to set that to 2. I'm going to leave the contrast on to like 7 or 8 and see what happens with this. And I'm also going to change that blending mode, because at the moment, underneath it, I need to change the blending mode so it'll blend to the layers underneath that to a soft light. And immediately you can kind of see that starting to happen now. We get this like cool effect where the light is hitting the lines where the pixels and the diodes are, and we're getting this really nice mix. So you can kind of play around. Overlay also works a little bit, but soft light I find is the kind of the sweet middle spot where you get something that's going to work a little bit kind of nicer for what we're trying to do. All right, so that's already kind of starting to look pretty cool. If you look at our original one, we've got a little bit more kind of definition happening in there. So I can come back in now on this, and I can edit some of these things a little bit more. So maybe this one where I had like this giant blur is not the best way to do it. Maybe I need to drop its opacity down a little bit more. I also can do this thing where the black background here is probably not the best way to go. And if I change that to a different color, you can see that it will start to kind of show some of those lines. So I want that a little bit, but I don't necessarily want it everywhere. So let's change that to like a darkish blue, but just so that it's not this kind of black that we've got. And already you can kind of see those lines coming in where before they were just kind of black. So we just got a little bit more definition happening.
That's really cool.
And this one's maybe a little bit too much. So let's drop that one down. That's better. Let's go a little bit more definition to it. Lower that one. Maybe we can tinker with this one a little bit more. That's cool. So again, all these effects are live, right? So once all those effects are applied onto that, we've got our gradient map, we got our filter here with these scan lines. You can then mess around with the brightness and opacity settings of this. Oh, sorry, not the brightness and opacity settings, the intensity of that blur, to try and get more or less kind of impact on that happening, and trying to see where all this kind of comes into play. I can also duplicate this gradient a little bit more. So here I've got this kind of color fill that I'm going to grab from here, and I can kind of pop that on top. And so we got this kind of like off-white effect. So all this is a solid color that has this kind of vivid light blending mode applied to it. So what I've done here is I've gone in and delete that, show you guys. Solid color, and we want this kind of like darkish green, and we want to apply a vivid light, where we go, sorry, whoops, in our blending modes, we want to go to vivid light, bang, here. And we can kind of decrease the opacity of that a little bit more to get that effect going in. So yeah, so basically that's almost everything that we can do now.
Cool.
But I also want to add a little bit more grain to this. I'm going to select all of these layers, and I'm going to hit Command, Option, Shift, E. And that's going to take all of the layers that I've got and merge them into one layer. But I still have all of that stuff underneath. And so all I need to do now is go and apply another solid color on top of this.
Can you move your layers panel just up a little bit? Because I've got the camera, like just the bottom of it. I know you're probably going to end up doing it. Doesn't have to be that much, but just so that they can see what you're clicking there. Because I got the camera over the top. I tried to switch it before, and then your mic cut out because I had a whole different scene set up. So that was totally my fault. So I'm just gonna have to leave it because I shouldn't have done that.
Is that okay where it is?
Great. Yeah, you got heaps more real estate than that. It's just I don't want to cover it up if someone's trying to follow and they can't see which of the icons you're selecting down the bottom there.
Yeah.
Yeah. My other option is cameras up the top, and then that covers everything up the top. So yeah.
So all we need to do now is just go into noise, add noise, and we can you can see what it's going to happen here. If I go into Gaussian, hit monochromatic, I've just got this little bit of graininess happening to it that just kind of gives it just that little bit of an edge. If I zoom in, you can kind of see, just again gets that kind of grit happening to it right there. Yeah, and that's basically that one.
Cool. Well, we had 2 questions in there. I'll hang on to until the end here. So one of the questions was, so you converted the letters into smart objects, Jeremy. So that was a little while ago. And yeah, that's what you did, right? You basically collected, it was the text, but also the symbols, I think, because you have that vector, but you converted everything to a smart object together.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that way, if there's text as part of that smart object, it's still fully editable, which is always good. And as we learned together, if you create...
still works.
Yeah, more blend layers from it, or you created more what type of layers were they that you added?
These just kind of duplicate layers to add in these smart filters.
Right, the smart
filters. So again, converting it to a smart object means like, okay, well, I can come back and like these scan lines were too small. I can just go in and fix that later on. So just by double clicking on these ones, you can really kind of set the tone without losing any of this information, and everything is live still. So it's a really just kind of nice option to have going into that, just to be able to kind of edit this a little bit more.
Yeah, awesome. And I think that also like just keep that in mind, everybody, as well, just in terms of like for any sort of graphic design stuff, like if you have some sort of lockup or a couple of different lockups that are text and vector based, you can kind of create that smart object, and then maybe in some scenes you really want to blend it into the background, and it's you're trying to superimpose it on a wall to look like signage, or trying to make it indented into a business card. You could still use the same smart object, but then apply it to all these different areas. So yeah, that was super cool. The other question was,
smart object is such a no-brainer always.
It's awesome, right? Yeah. So don't sleep on smart objects. We'll move on after this one. But the other question, Delicia was asking, is this technique doable for beginners? You might be a little bit overwhelmed because Jeremy had a lot of layers there, but if you just follow it step by step, there was only really a couple of different layers in there. And I jumped around a little bit because like tweaking a little bit here and a little bit there, because Jeremy obviously like knows Photoshop incredibly well, but there's really just a couple of basic steps and you could achieve something very, very similar. And of course you can just follow along slowly, but there's a lot of different layers, I would say, Jeremy. Do you agree in this one? But you could get a pretty similar effect quickly.
There's quite a bit of a process happening. It's all like straightforward. Again, if you just kind of follow this, it's all pretty straightforward. But there's a lot of like, like stuff like remember to set this light to this one to vivid light so that you get this one. And like, why is my thing not working? You just have to make sure that you kind of tick the boxes in a progressive manner. But really at its core, all it is making some type, applying a blur to it, and then applying some scan lines to it. And that will basically be the kind of the overall kind of effect. So it's just like type, make some blur, duplicate that effect a bunch of times, control it, and then apply this scan line effect to it, and then tweak the colors. And then you can just fiddle with those settings to see what works best. But yeah, and look, like as you can see, like I've done this now with this one, and I've done it with this one, and I'm getting slightly different results. So those settings can be a little bit kind of a bit fiddly. But in terms of the process, this one's pretty simple and straightforward. So definitely beginner friendly.
Nice.
This next one I think is probably a little bit more beginner friendly, less kind of step intensive. As you can see from my layers here, I've only got a few layers, so this one's a little bit kind of simpler to mess around with. So let's get stuck into this one. So this one is basically just like a type with a little bit of an effect on it. We've got some Liquify and some smudge tool. And then we're applying a gradient map on top of it to get this kind of cool, like hypercolor kind of effect to it all.
Yeah.
Right? So we've got this piece of text and we've got a black background underneath it. I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to select both, right click, and convert to smart object. So again, this is just a way for me to use the black and the white together without being stuck and being able to not being able to edit this later on. But in order to do the liquify and the effect that I'm wanting, I can't just have the type on its own layer. I need the black pixels behind it. So I kind of need it to be flat without being flat. And a smart object, smart layer, allows me to do that. Actually, I've skipped a step. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
First, before doing that, forget what I said. I am going to rasterize this type. So I'm going to make it not type. So this one won't be editable live,
Right.
unfortunately, but either way, because of the effects that we're going to do it later, it won't be that way at all anyways. So I'm going to move this down in my composition, and I'm going to grab like maybe the top like 20% of this. And I can either just do Command X, Command V, and that will just cut and paste in place. So basically all I've done here is I've just taken the top half of that, slice it off, put it onto a new layer. Or there's a faster way of doing this, and that is Command Shift J. And that will take my selection and automatically make a new layer of it into a new layer, but paste it in place. So it's just one less kind of button press to do smarter.
It does that, and it deletes what you've selected in the current layer.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
instead of like normally what Command J does is it will take that and duplicate that selection so that I've got that, but still the information underneath it from the original layer, right?
Right.
Command Shift J deletes that kind of stuff. So it's a really nifty kind of thing to know if you've got a bunch of objects on the same layer, or if you've got like you want to separate each one of these letters here onto its own layer, you can just hit Command Shift J and it will automatically cut it from the original layer and apply it to a new layer on.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's one of those like shortcuts that I discovered like a few months ago, and I was like,
yeah, that's all. I've never seen that before. It's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've got that one. We got that one up there. I'm going to select the tiniest little slither of this from the bottom of the top layer, and I'm going to hit Control T and drag that down all the way. I have to drag it quite a bit of a distance, all the way down so that it kind of matches up with my original text there. And we're almost there. Here we go. Done. So I've basically just kind of taken this text and just kind of smudged it as if you were like moved it while you were scanning it type of thing. And that's kind of, I think that's just exactly the effect that I'm after for this. There we go. And now I can take these two, merge them together. Right. So all I'm doing here is, or you could right click and say merge layers, which is Command E. So that's what all I've done. Command E, merge those two layers together.
This is very like designer editorial vibes.
a little bit, yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to take all of these guys and I'm going to convert these to a smart object. So I needed to do my kind of type bit first, and now I can kind of do this going into it. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my filter gallery, go to blur, and I'm going to go to blur gallery, and I'm going to do a field blur, which is something that I discovered recently. And this is quite cool because what it will allow you to do is kind of place a bunch of blurs individually around here and control how much blur they impact.
Oh, wow.
But also at the same time, allowing you to position these a little bit more kind of clearly. So you can get some really cool like effects with this going into it, where, you know, like I can have the bottom be unblurred and the top be like super blurred, or I can add in like a massive blur in this area, which makes it obviously impossible to read. But you get some really kind of nice effects kind of going into that. So that's our kind of blur happening there.
That's cool. That reminds me a lot of gradient mesh in Illustrator, where you can kind of put the points where you want the mesh to go. or the
I
gradient.
think it's obviously kind of like similar tech
Yeah,
in
must
that
be.
way. And again, because I've got this on a smart object, I can come back into this and edit this later on and just totally do whatever I want to this and give it this kind of like bleedy, kind of grungy effect, like it's been a little bit lo-fied.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Now we can add some liquify or smudge this. So there's two ways to do this. Either I can go to my smudge tool, and I've got the strength up here set to about 50%, and I could just smudge it that way. It wants me to rasterize. Okay, well then I won't do it that way. I will do it with my Liquify tool. So go into Liquify, and basically this will do kind of the same thing. We've just got a little bit more kind of control over it. So I can make this nice and big, and I can start to kind of push and blend this kind of smudged text to get this kind of cool effect happening.
Yeah.
I could give it a twirl as well in the middle to get some extra kind of funky stuff going in. If you're so inclined as well, using the push tool or the smudge tool up here, you can start to get kind of like flame effects happening off the top. So I can kind of set this on fire a little bit, or just kind of do whatever I want. Obviously, like the more edits you do to this, the harder it is going to be to like understand what the word is actually saying, depending on how important that is for you or not. We can kind of play around with that a little bit, but I'm going to hit OK on that. And I'm going to go in as well to my add a gradient map onto this, and go gradient map. And I'm going to select one of the gradient maps that I've got in here. So I've got a bunch of preset ones that I've created. So this is kind of like a chrome, kind of like sunset effect. If I flip this, you can kind of see that a little bit better. So we get these kind of like hyper color, interesting kind of things going on.
And for those who, because I know there might be some beginners in chat as well, for those, there's still going to be gradients in like Photoshop, like vanilla, without you saving this. Just Jeremy has like particular color.
You got all these basic
combos.
ones that exist.
Yeah. So you can still do this at home.
So they're all kind of in there. I've just created my own ones, and it's pretty easy to create. Literally, if you go into something like this, you can just kind of make all the edits that you want to make going into here. Kind of, you can see what's going on here is it's kind of helping me kind of edit that a little bit more clearly. I can do all types of stuff to this and get some really cool, like, again, this kind of like hyper color vibe. And then if I hit new here, it will just save that gradient for later. So you can just literally just make all of these kind of custom gradients yourself and kind of see where that leans into. And hit OK. And then again, for good measure, I'm also going to add in a solid color layer onto this, make it white. And we got our gradient map on top, so it's not going into white. That's OK. And convert it to a smart object. And I'm going to go into my filter, go back into my noise, and put in my trusty noise and put that onto a multiply layer. And I can come back in onto this.
Nice.
And reduce it. And we've just got a little bit of extra kind of grit to get rid of that kind of smoothness applied onto here. So we get these really cool kind of burn, kind of oversaturated hype effects on that. And that one's a really kind of just a simple one of just like play around with this a little bit. The really nifty thing about this is that my Liquify is still kind of live. And so I can come back in and make more edits to this as I need to. Unfortunately, I can't kind of fully reconstruct this, or I can, but it starts to get a little bit kind of tricky to work with if I do that. But yeah, because I'm using these smart objects, it's all editable later on. Unfortunately, the type in this one is not editable. But it wouldn't be editable anyways, because if you typed it a different thing with all the effects that we put onto that in the Liquify, it just wouldn't do the same thing, and you would get these kind of weird effects happening to it. But it's a cool way as well, if you kind of think about it, to apply a little bit of a kind of an effect to this that's going to allow me to make some kind of like flame effects with my smudge tool using my gradient map, you can start to see that I'm getting these kind of like really soft gradients of kind of fire happening.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, because the smudge tool requires that to be a raster file, I no longer have it set to a smart object. So all of those filters are now gone. But, you know, again, if you're kind of keen to get this effect going on there, you can get a much kind of cleaner effect with that grain and with that gradient map applying to it. You get some really kind of nifty stuff going in.
That's awesome. I love that. I love the gritty spray paint kind of effect where the color and the noise is interacting in the middle. You could just play around with that so much. Like, and this is just with type, but you could do the same thing with your illustrations, right? For those watching, you might have some drawings that are looking a bit flat and everything like that. You can kind of get in there, smudge them around, and play with some of those gradient maps. I think they're so cool.
Yeah, it's always super fun to kind of work with these and see kind of what results you get. Yeah. Another thing kind of in a similar way, before we move on to something else, is like if I went in to make some different types, so you can see like, all right, let's go in and change the font of this one. We're going to use this and we're going to make it white. Bang. Whoa. Very big. I can change this to a smart object again. And what it will allow me to do is I can just kind of put this in perspective a little bit. So I'm going to rotate and I'm going to edit this by holding down Control or Command, depending on if you're a Mac or a PC. You can actually start to kind of put this in perspective a little bit. And I'm going to kind of melt this in 3D, but I also wanted to show you using this kind of new thing again, this blur gallery, this field blur. We've also got a tilt shift that we can do.
I was going to say, like with the thing before, you could make a pretty good tilt shift effect with it
100%.
for photography, just because when you can actually place exactly where the blur goes as a radial or linear blur, that's what makes a tilt shift work, right? So yeah, is this new? I don't know if
I'm not sure, but again, just playing around and kind of doing a bit of research on these videos, I've kind of discovered this one. I'm not sure that it's super new, but you get some nice effects of like this type now looks like it's like properly in perspectives, and we get this kind of like lens.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Depth of field thing kind of happened to it. And so again, same idea, right? If I take my gradient map and put it on top of that, and I'm going to go into filter and go into Liquify, then I can kind of melt this down off the kind of the ledge a little bit. If I don't want it to grab all of my type, I can freeze a selection of my type. So if I go into this this tool here, freeze mask, it will block out this area of my type, so that then when I liquify, it only liquefies the selections that are outside of that area. So it doesn't kind of mess with my type too much in that way.
Yeah.
So I'm not losing that legibility going in. And so there we go. We got this kind of cool liquify effect. Again, the blur here is relatively important because you can see I haven't applied a blur to this. I'm not getting the same range of colors as I am on the areas that are a little bit more blurry with this gradient. So if you are looking for that kind of like hypercolor vibe, it is important to add a blur to this and being able to go into your smart filter. I'm going to add in another field blur onto it. Go. And you'll see that that starts to really kind of come out. So just adding a little bit of blur to that just means that your gradient map has room to kind of do its thing and really kind of shine in that way.
It's really cool. I like that. I've got Photoshop open. I'm trying to figure out how recently the tilt shift and everything, because that's something that's in it's in Lightroom. So photographers will use that quite a lot, like the radial and everything. Like every photo will have a little bit of a vignette and like a little bit of I don't know if it's called tilt shift, but they'll do that a little bit. But yeah, I have not seen it in Photoshop, so that's super cool. And using it in type. It's really cool kind of effect. It's awesome.
A lot of really good kind of like options that you could do with that. I think it'd be really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, so our final one is probably the one that I think is like quite exciting.
Okay, you've got 9 minutes, by the way. Realize.
We can do this.
Sorry.
But it's also because we're going to use Firefly. It's also the one that's maybe not as kind of like replicable every single time.
Right. Cool. That's awesome.
So I'm going to make this kind of text going into this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to make some text in here. I'm going to go with PUNK punk, and I'm going to change the typeface. And we're going to go quick so we don't run out of time. And I'm going to rasterize this, make it a bit bigger. And I'm going to go to Effect, 3D Materials, Bevel and Extrude. I'm going to give it a little bit more depth. I'm going to change the angle of this and so on and so forth. Turn on ray tracing so we got a little bit more light. And so basically what I've done is I have created a little bit of text so that I can have this. Right? Yep. That's what I'm after. So all I've done from that, if I go back into Illustrator, is I've then gone and taken a screenshot of this, or you can save it as a JPEG if you want. Screenshot's a little bit faster for me. And I'm going to use this as a reference. So let's jump into Firefly. And I've also got these images here. I've saved the prompt for this in the name. So it's a little trick that I learned from somebody recently where if you like an image that you've downloaded from Firefly, it's a good idea to call this the prompt that you use to get it. So you may or may not be able to replicate it later on.
It should, when you download it, it should save it as that as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of like fiddling with this a little bit.
Certainly what it used to do, it used to save like as long as it could, it would save it with your words in there.
Cool. So we've got some new ones going in there. So I've grabbed these images. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and say, okay, in my composition, I want my composition to reference the text that I had. So I'm going to go into my text here. I'm going to find this screenshot of this text. I'm going to say, use this as a model for the image that you're going to create, right? I'm going to bump the strength up to 100. And then in my reference image, if I liked any of these, I could download them and use them as a reference image. This one's actually quite cool. I might save that one for later, same as this one. But in here, I'm going to go to select my image, and I'm going to grab this one that I had before and say open. And I can then hit generate.
Nice.
And this will use, depending on the agent. So there's a few different kind of settings that we can fiddle with to get different results here. And like I said, this is probably the one that's like you maybe have the least control over because it's going to generate something new every time. Like, why did it do this and not that? But generally speaking, we've got a nice kind of like grungy concrete cube, dirty and worn, spray paint and stickers, black background, neon lighting.
Yeah.
And so that's the prompt that we got to generate these kind of cubes. And we've applied this to our punk text, and we've got this cool kind of effect going on to that. If I mess around with the different engines, so we've got Firefly 4, and Firefly 3. 4 gets more detail, and you also get a higher res image, but 3 can often do some maybe more like accurate kind of results, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So just showing you guys what that does. So in this one now, we've really got like that concrete block. Like 4 has added a little bit of an outline around this. It's like we're not sure why it's kind of doing that. It's added a lot of background elements, whereas 3 is only really kind of doing exactly kind of what I told it, but it's a lower res image. And we've got a little bit more kind of wiggle room to mess around with. So play around with the engine. You can also play around with the strength of the style. So you want to leave the strength of your composition at 100, but the style you can drop down and you might get varying levels of fidelity on that style going into it. And you can kind of see, obviously this isn't using any of my monthly credits as well, which is nice, but yeah. So here you can see it's added in some smoke, it's added in a bunch of different things. So you can grab all of these and kind of take them into Photoshop if you want to, and edit them a little bit kind of later on. So let's say I'm going to grab, I quite like this one, so I'm going to bring this one into Photoshop, and I can bring in some of those elements that I had previously and just kind of dress this up a little bit more to get those kind of, let's say I quite like these ones. I'm going to bring these ones back into there. Yep, done. And so, yeah, you can see like I can use this composition to start making kind of like an image that is going to be kind of a little bit more interesting, a little bit kind of cleaner.
Yeah.
A little bit more cyberpunk. But yeah, that's it. That's basically just kind of like using Illustrator to make this 3D block of text, and then using Firefly and different kind of prompts that you can mess around with to get this kind of really cool like effects on the text. And I just realized I made a punk rock.
Ha! That's awesome. I didn't pick that up at all. That's great. Punk rock.
So yeah, so you can get some really like interesting things with all of this. Unfortunately, obviously, this is a flat image. You wouldn't be able to kind of do too much to it. But really cool if you're kind of wanting some quick reference guides of different materials and things to mess around with.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
for those with no
that's it.
experience with 3D, you can create some pretty cool 3D stuff pretty quick, which is great.
Totally, yeah. Which is why I used Illustrator, because that 3D tool is quite easy to use and
Yeah.
get some really kind of cool results.
Yeah, for those that haven't played around with it, it's actually super easy and intuitive, and you just kind of go down the options and just change it to however you want. It's quite an upgrade from the original one. My tip is to play around with it a lot, and even if it doesn't look that great, the trick here is the rasterize. So up the top right, Jeremy clicked rasterize while he's doing it. I know the powerful machine that Jeremy is on right now.
Yeah.
Mileage will vary playing with 3D in real time. So that's why that button exists. So you can play with it low fidelity, and then you click rasterize. On one of my computers, it takes like 30 seconds like to render in real time. So just be aware of that if you're playing around. Look how cool that is. But that's amazing. Well, hey, we're out of time. We've got Annika joining us in about 10 minutes or less to jump in with some Adobe Express stuff. Jeremy, you've given me homework. I've got stuff to try out now.
Yeah.
A bunch of things I didn't know existed.
And we're back on tomorrow. I'm going to show you guys how to do these cool like photography-based effects in Photoshop again.
Awesome. That's so cool. Well, I'm sure I'm going to learn a bunch then as well. But yeah, same time, same channel. So come and join us again. Thank you, everybody, for jumping into chat as well. Great to see some new folks. We hope you'll join us again on Adobe Live. And yeah, stick around. We'll be back in a few minutes with Annika. Thanks a lot, Jeremy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.